I'm Becky Prebble. I work for the New Zealand Treasury. I'm a senior analyst in the macroeconomic and fiscal policy team. Now, one of the questions we ask in that team is, well, what would happen to government spending in the future if all government spending programs remain the same? So it's asking the question, well, what if we didn't change anything for 50 years? And the reason is that if you look at what happens if we didn't change them, that gives you a sense of, well, what might we need to change and when. There are two areas of government spending that are going to get considerably more expensive in the future. Now, they are public healthcare and New Zealand superannuation. The reason this matters is that they're going to get so much more expensive that unless we make some changes, whether that is to health or super or something else, or the amount of tax we collect, we will not be actually able to afford them in the future. And by not afford them, I mean that our tax revenue will not cover the sum of things that the government wants to spend money on. It's fairly serious in that we do actually need to do something about it. But the government is, in a way, already managing long-term fiscal pressures by its current fiscal strategy. And it's not like there's just one path that's appropriate, and different governments would naturally take different approaches. One thing that really surprised me when I started working on this was the magnitude of the challenge in public healthcare. So when I first came onto this project, I know it's about long-term fiscal pressures. In my mind, it was essentially all about superannuation. So if everybody aged 65 or over is eligible for superannuation, well, it means that in a world where more people will be 65 or over, which is what the world will be in 2030, then superannuation costs go up. Public healthcare, though, is more complicated. Quite a few people would naturally assume that the ageing population has a big impact on healthcare costs. And that's not wrong, it does have an impact, but it's not the whole story, and it's possibly not as big an impact as you might first assume. The biggest things actually that are causing increased health pressures, and in fact have always caused increased health pressures, are changes in technology and also increasing public expectations. And if you think back over the last 15 years, well, there have been huge advances in healthcare. I mean, for example, treatment of HIV with antiretrovirals. 15 years ago, if you had HIV, then you were almost definitely going to get AIDS, and it was almost definitely going to kill you. Now, that's really not true. That's been really amazing for our quality of life. But, we do have to pay for these things. They're not free. The New Zealand healthcare system is already starting to reorient itself to future needs. The big thing, I think, that in terms of healthcare that will be different in the future relative to the past is that there'll be much more focus on caring for chronic conditions. In the past, and most healthcare systems around the world are really best set up to deal with acute conditions, like someone has some bad thing that is wrong with them that needs immediate care for right now, for maybe for a couple of weeks. But now, and it's partly to do with an older population as well, chronic conditions are on the rise, and most people with a chronic condition have quite a few chronic conditions, and the kind of care you need for that is quite different to what you need if you've broken your leg, say. The reason this is so important for young people to think about is that what we're talking about, these long-term projections, is the world you will eventually inherit. You are going to be, and are already, the taxpayers who are paying to support all this spending. I think from talking to various younger people, I think some people feel that they don't necessarily have a voice in this debate and feel somewhat disenfranchised. I think the thing to address that is really to give yourself a voice and also realise that there are perhaps more opportunities than it might at first seem. When I first started this project, there's a lot of, narrative around about baby boomers versus millennials, this kind of generational contract. And when I started this project, that was somewhat how I thought about it as well. After having done it, I don't really find that a helpful framework now. I don't know if you can really compare the fortunes of a whole generation with another generation, because you can always say, oh, hang on, but you got this thing that we didn't get, and that's you can just carry on like that forever. I guess also more fundamentally, I think, well, even if you could conclude that some generation did way better from the world than another generation. I don't know if that really takes you that far, because if it's the question is really, well, what do we do now that's best for everyone's living standards? You know, what is now the use of government money and our taxes that is most in line with what we actually want? And the question of, you know, whether maybe some generation did better is not all that relevant to the future.